What's up guys, Justin here with the CGEssentials.com. So in today's video we're going to check out a brand new add-on from CGMATTER with a number of awesome new geometry node curve based setups. Let's go ahead and just jump into it. Alright, so if you've spent any time at all around the Blender space on YouTube, you probably know who CGMATTER is. He's got an awesome channel. He's got over 255,000 subscribers and he teaches people how to do a lot of different interesting things in Blender. So his videos are really great and he does some really cool stuff, and he's just rolled out a new tool specifically designed to help you do curves in Blender. So I'll link to his channel down below if you want to go check out some of his videos. If you're not subscribed there, you really should be. But in this case, we're here specifically to talk about Curvify. So Curvify is his new geometry node based curve generation tool, and it's basically a collection of different tools designed to help you create different things using curves in Blender. So we'll take a look at some of these, but basically he's got tools that allow you to create everything from ropes to chains. He's got a really awesome barbed wire tool, which we're going to check out, which is really great as well. These aren't just tools for creating things along paths. He's also got some interesting tools in here that use curves in order to like wrap decals along spheres and other things like that. So let's go ahead and let's take a look at this and some of the stuff that comes along with it. One thing to note about this is when he does add things to Curvify in the future, this is a perpetual thing. So if you buy it, you get those updates in the future. So first thing is this is an asset collection. So it's not necessarily an add-on in the sense that you don't go into preferences and install it as an add-on. What you do instead is you unzip it, and then within your file paths, what you do is you add the asset browser folder into your asset libraries, and then it's going to show up in your asset browser down below. So it's pretty easy to use. It's just different than some of the add-ons that we've used in the past. But basically, once you do that, you can find that folder, and this is going to be the collection of things that are contained inside of this asset library. And so once you decide you want to use them, all you have to do is just drag them in like this, and that's going to bring the asset in. And so when we look at the asset, notice how if we tab into edit mode, this asset is following along a curve, right? So if I move things on the curve like this, the asset's going to update. And so in addition to this, you could also come in here and draw your own curves. So if you wanted like your own fence or something like that, and I did not do a very good job of keeping that on the same plane. But if you do want to create your own fence, you can definitely do that as well. So notice how when you draw this in here, it's going to generate that along the path. And so these all have their own settings that you can use to adjust them. And let's go ahead and check out the barbed wire. That's one of my favorite ones. So if we bring the barbed wire in like this, notice how initially what this is this is just a piece of barbed wire that's just following along a circular path, right? And you can draw like a straight path as well if you decide that you want to do that. So if I was to draw this right here, it's going to do the same thing. But if we take a look at the settings for the barbed wire, it's going to allow us to do things like setting the gap between the different barbs, but then you can also adjust how big these are. And where this gets really interesting is you can also add a spiral, right? So you can set this to have a number of different loops in here. So if you wanted to create spiraling, if you wanted to add like razor wire on top of a fence or something like that, you could do that really easily with this tool. And again, this is all curve based. So if I was to come in here and make an adjustment, right? So if I was to move this right here, notice how that that fence is going to adjust along with that. So these are all live, and it's one of the things I really love about geometry nodes is how easy it is to make those changes. So you've also got the chain in here, and the chain is probably a little more your typical, right? So it's a little bit more of the typical geometry node setup that you might see. But again, you've got the ability to add some random rotation to your chain if you want to do that. You can adjust the scale, so how big it is, as well as the radius of the links in here. And so where this gets really interesting though is there are some cool ones we'll talk about in a second that follow along a path, but this also gets interesting because you've got other things that you wouldn't necessarily think to do with curves. Like for example, this cloud. What this cloud is going to do is it's going to create a volume. So we would have to jump over into rendered mode in order to see this. And remember that you're really going to need to be in cycles for this to work, but you can basically add curves in here and it's going to generate volumes along the curve. So you can use this and use the curves in order to create clouds in the 3D space that are then going to be rendered in cycles. All right, so next up we've got the feather, which generates a feather along a curve. So you can select the parts and pieces of the curve and adjust them. You can rotate them and scale them in order to generate this feather. And then we've got some settings off on the right-hand side here. You can adjust the resolution as well as the seed, so it's going to give you more like randomness in here. And again, by adjusting things along the curves, you can adjust the way that feather is going to look. All right, so some of these others are interesting in the sense that they're animated, so they actually move. So for example, the flow, you can bring this in, and what this is going to do is it's going to create a flow animation along a path. And so notice how it brings in the flow as well as the sphere object. Well, the sphere object is the object that's being placed along this path. So you can adjust the path, which is going to adjust where this flows. You can also select a different object, and it's going to use that object as the object that flows along the path. And you can take this and you can adjust, like the more points that you add in here, the more spheres you're going to get. You can also adjust the size of those spheres. And so to change the object, all you need to do is go into your geometry node setup and select a different object. So if I do that and then I take a look at this, notice how this is now emitting the Suzanne model that I selected instead of the sphere. So you can set this to emit whatever shape or geometry you want and flow it along a path. And so in kind of in a continuation of that, he's also got a river that does the same thing. So we're going to jump over here and we're going to let the materials compile real quick. But if you click play in here, notice how this is creating a flow of a river. And again, it's based on a curve. So if you want to make adjustments to this, it's totally live and you can completely do that. So it's got the ability to adjust the width, the speed that the river flows, the size of the rocks. So just a really interesting application of geometry nodes. I've actually seen one like this before, but this one seems to be working great, and it's just a great way to kind of create that moving water animation inside of Blender. So another application that we've got in here that I've never actually seen with geometry nodes before is the ability to add a decal. So if I bring a decal in here, what that's going to do is that's going to let me reference the sphere object, and then I can draw a curve on top of that object. And so when I do that, what I'm going to get is I'm going to get these blank decals in here. Well, the decal object has a material applied to it. So if you go into your shader editor, all you have to do is just add an image texture node. So just do a Shift A and do image texture in here, and you just want to add it to the node setup right here. So this is pretty typical stuff for adding materials. And then once you do that, you just open the object that you want, or open the image that you want, and it's going to apply that as a decal to your surface. And then you can use the geometry node settings to set like the rotation as well as the offset on the surface. So instead of messing around with modifiers, this allows you to use curves in order to add decals. And so you've got an object in here that you can use in order to add screws to a surface as well. So if you do want to add those in here, you can definitely do that. And then you could scale them up. So again, the size of the curve is going to be what sets that. Now, one thing I will note is if I set the object in here to the sphere, it kind of messes up the direction that these are going. I don't know if I'm doing something wrong or what. I found if I go into the geometry node setup and I just adjust the align, I don't know how you say this word, Euler to vector. If you just set the factor to 0, then it'll align them a little bit better with the surface. So I'm not sure exactly what's going on. So I actually found that they work a little bit better if I just don't set the object in there. So I don't know what's going on with that. There is still a little bit of movement going on with some of these node setups. And then the last one I want to show you is the snow. So the snow is really interesting because what it does is it gives you basically what it sounds like, right? It gives you a snow object. But if I run this in the timeline, I click play, it's going to basically emit snow using your geometry node setup. And so you can add additional emission locations, and notice how when you do that, it's going to add that into your scene. It's going to add some additional snow in here. So this is using geometry nodes in order to set falling snow, and you can adjust things like the spread, the height, the speed, and the size. So if you wanted to make these bigger, you can definitely do that just to kind of see what's going on. So you can also add a little bit of wind in here to your snow as well. So again, just a really creative usage of geometry nodes in Blender. All right, so that's where I'm in this video. Like I said, a couple of the node setups that go on the surfaces are acting a little bit odd, but overall the creativeness that went into this add-on and what's contained inside of it really kind of blew me away, because there's a lot of cool stuff that you can do, and I know he's adding to this in the future. But leave a comment below, let me know what you think. As always, thank you so much for taking the time to watch this, and I'll catch you in the next video. Thanks, guys.